Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, so we have done 2021 champions ranked, and it's time to rank all the buffs that we have had in 2021. Now, when it comes to champions buffed, we actually have more than the champions released, because initially we got schedule of 442, then it changed to 3 champions a month, then it changed to 2 champions a month. As an end result, we have had 31 champions buffed. So we are going to start with the bottom 16, and then we're going to leave the second video for top 15. So this is going to be 16 worst buffs or 16 most unsuccessful buffs. Before we get started, this time there has to be 2 disclaimers, because number 1 is we need to realize what kind of criteria I used, because we can take a look at the buffs from how much better did the champion get, and that is extremely subjective, because then you need to establish a starting point. What do you think of the champion before, and what do you think of it now? And then that would mean that the champion that was previously already good, but it got improved slightly and now is, let's say, really good, actually didn't get that great of a buff because there hasn't been that much of a difference. So in order to kind of simplify it, the way I'm going to be looking at it is just the finished end product. If after the buff, how good is a champion? That's it. So the buff might have been somewhat minor, but if the end result is great, then we're going to rank up champion highly. If no matter how bad the champion was before the buff, the champion ends up being mediocre or bad, then it's going to rank lower. So that is quite simple, and that is quite important to understand here as well, that we are looking at the end result. How good is the champion after the buff, not how valuable the buff was in itself. And then the second disclaimer, obviously, that these are my opinions and the way I view the game. This is not a Bible, this is not a fact, this is just how I look at those champions. And there is a very, very narrow kind of difference, especially in the middle. I think there is a fairly clear top 6 or so, the buffs that got, like, you know, the best treatment, the champions that worked out extremely well. There are about 6 to 8, 9, maybe 10 in top that are, you know, step above others, and there are like 4, 5 at the bottom, and everything else in between is a very similar neighborhood, which actually kind of leads me to think that you know, Kabam might kind of know what they're doing with these to a degree at the very well, to kind of keeping, you know, balanced mid-tier champions that people like, that people use. And as a good example of this, there will be champions that are towards the bottom of the list that I personally like, that I have ranked up for one reason or another. Doesn't mean that they are the greatest or the best buff champions, or they are insane, but it means that there's something to them that I enjoy or find useful for my account specifically. Right. Also, this time we're going to use my game screen instead of Outmay, because I think it could be a bit easier and quicker to filter between the champions that I'm trying to find, opposing to Outmay, because obviously all these champions buffed, you know, they're not from the same class or same year and things like that. So to start off, the worst buff, the worst, most fail, unsuccessful buff that ended up in, well, in my opinion, very hard to enjoy and very hard to love champion. That is Civil Warrior. Now, I do have a 6-star rank 1, I do have a 5-star rank 4, and I was really hopeful for this buff. Unfortunately, it just didn't deliver. I think the person who designed this buff didn't quite understand what Civil Warrior does or how he is to be played. The mechanics are kind of too convoluted, too timer watchy, and it's just too impractical. Yes, you can get 50 Furies with the gun, get a massive attack increase, but in majority of the situations that demands you forfeit all the potential utility that you might have had with the champion, and puts really demanding playstyle. Haven't seen many people, you know, actively play Civil Warrior after his buff either, as a good indicator. Really don't have anything to like about this buff. And the irony is that they could have made it a good buff if they simply tied his Furies to the armor buffs and made it so that whenever you gain an armor buff, you gain a Fury. When you refresh one, you refresh the other. Or just gave him attack increase based on the amount of armor buffs you have, and you would have a much better champion. but that whole dashing back converting thing, it just doesn't work. So simple as that. I think Steel Warrior is hot garbage before buff and after the buff, and there's not much to do with him. Moving on to the next champion that we need to take a look at is here, Gamora. Now, Gamora is another champion that not many people kind of saw coming, getting buffed, and that is also kind of like the theme 2021, that not all that many meme champions got buffed. A lot of mid-tier champions were the ones chosen for an upgrade. Obviously, we had some of the old X memes that are now, you know, respectable champions, but there's a ton of champions that were already fairly good and then still got the buff. And similarly, yeah, Gamora, this was second buff for her, believe it or not, but it was a big fat nothing burger. They hardly changed anything about her, and as an end result, she's pretty much the same champion she was before. If the fight's extremely easy, where you can easily access and spam your heavy attacks, then you can get up a massive damage output. Sure, she's also quite fine in short questing scenarios. She has a relatively decent kind of like quick fight damage by gaining a couple of those Furies, Cruelties, dropping a guaranteed special crit, guaranteed crit special. And, you know, she can finish off fights quite quickly, but there's just not much to the champion. And as an end result, she remained exactly what she was. And that's extremely, again, upsetting waste of a buff, I would say. But still better than Civil Warrior, as in, like, you might actually want to use her for something, I think. Okay, moving up to one of the earliest buffs of the year, and also one of the biggest fails, that will be Nova. As most of us know, again, Nova does have some fun following, and he always has had it since the release. Unfortunately, his playstyle just doesn't quite justify anything, to be honest, because he has fairly finicky, tricky playstyle, and there's just not a good reason to use him for most part. And the buff is, again, quite laughable. They hardly changed anything. I legitimately remember struggling very hard to see what had changed in the champion. And, you know, they increased a couple of timers. They gave him, like, somewhat more damage, and that was just about it. They didn't give him any additional utility. They didn't make him easier to play. And, you know, he, again, is pretty much exactly the same as he was before the buff. And here we are. So Nova takes spot number 29. Another waste of a buff, waste of a spot for a buff. Moving on, and this champion, probably some people will already be, you know, liking. I remember some favorable videos on YouTube channels posted about this champion after the buff. It is of tech class, and just let me find it. Where is that little scoundrel? And that's Vulture. Vulture now kind of enters like a bit higher category, I would say. I look at Vulture as more useful champion than the previous three. He isn't as bad. He can be a decent champion. He really can be. Has some cool synergies that gives him extra immunities. I do like those, especially because they're decent champions. Like with Ultron and War Machine, he can get poison immunity. With Kingpin or Mechakra, he can get shock immunity, and he already has incinerate immunity. So I do like that he has like flexible immunities, I guess. All in all, they did make him a better version of himself, which is kind of like the point of these buffs. It's just the problem is that it's still, in my opinion, not quite worth investing and using this champion. If you pull Vulture really early in the games, like your first 6-star or first 5-star, you know, I'm sure you're going to be able to get some job done. I'm not trying to crap on Vulture. I just think that nobody really wants to use or play with this guy for most part. There are some cheesy interactions with some cav Q nodes, but, you know, that's about as good as it gets for this guy. And again, I'm not trying to kind of like insult. Every single champion above in this list is gonna have people that like these champions. As I said, I myself have ranked up champions from very low in this list that you will see in next few minutes. It's just very tricky to rank all of them because they are fairly narrowly together. Somebody has to be on bottom, and I think it's Vulture, just because you hardly see anybody ever use him. You hardly see anybody ever talk about him. Many people forget that he got buffed in the first place. And that's the unfortunate truth, all in all. And fairly similar situation is going to be with the next champion on this list, and that is going to be off the skill class, and that is going to be Ronin. Now, I actually was looking forward to this buff as well, because I did see quite a lot of potential in this guy, and I thought he could be quite cool, he could be quite interesting. And Ronin was already relatively good champion before the buff. He really was. You know, he could do some things, he was quite fun to play, the quirky playstyle and stuff like that. But all the changes that they did to him didn't really amount to much. And again, people who like Ronin will carry on liking Ronin 100%. And, you know, you do you. Every person has champions that they like for one reason or another. But nobody can deny the fact that even after the buff, his popularity or usability has not increased the slightest. The major kind of change that they gave him was that that a weight on his sig ability removes 3 cruelty passives rather than all 7, and then you can basically get more potent furies and kind of get an alternative way to play him. But there are a few downsides on that. First one is that a weight will not trigger unless you have the full 7 cruelty passives, and the second is that every single thing that you do kind of requires those cruelty passives, and it's again more like a resource rather than an actual damage boost, because if you activate level 3, you consume the cruelty passives. If you activate like level 2, you consume the cruelty passives if you trigger the sig ability. So you can seemingly never build them kind of fast enough. And for what it's worth, a champion that does plenty of things well, but none of them great, it just fails to find a solid home or purpose. Again, not a bad champion. Pulling him early, or if you enjoy using him, you know, I'm sure you can do a lot of cool things with him, just like with most of these champions after their buffs, but just did not quite nail this one. Moving up, spot number 26. Spot number 26, we have maybe somewhat controversial pick. A lot of people will not think as highly as I do of this buff, and that is Yellowjacket. I think Yellowjacket is actually much better than a lot of people realize after his buff. There are definite issues with him, and I do think that if only they had given this guy somewhat higher damage, he would be way more popular. Facts of the matter are, he's one of the tankiest champions in the game now, with having some of the highest physical and energy resistance in game. I believe he has both of them in the base kit, highest physical and energy resistance. And, you know, if he's SIG 200 in even longer fights with reapplying that power sting from level 3, he can do quite well. People who have him genuinely often like using the guy because there is value to be found in him. But I think they just somewhat undertuned him. I like the fact that he has the Petrify. He's one of the very few champions that can passively basically nullify healing ability without needing to land a debuff or anything of the sort. He has the power stings, which is still fairly rare mechanic. And that nuclear meltdown thing, you know, it could have been more powerful perhaps. There's just something slightly missing for the guy, I feel. I like Yellowjacket. I genuinely am considering of taking him up maybe to rank 2 or 3 as well, for one reason or another. But he just didn't quite stick the landing on this buff. I think there are a ton of cool aspects. I was super hopeful for it, especially with that slow that somehow comes from synergies. You know, good things in this buff just did not come together, and largely due to the damage, to be honest. So here we are with Yellowjacket. Could have been much higher, could have been much better buff. Could, or would he just kind of push a bit more? Right, now spot number 25. Spot number 25, we have one of the most controversial buffs of the year. This is Guillotine. Now, Guillotine is genuinely better than a lot of people think she is. But I don't think also that's kind of like the point. First of all, the big thing that, did Guillotine get a lot better than she was? No. I think Guillotine was already pre-buff somewhat solid, and post-buff, she's, slightly better. There's not that big of a difference. She can do some cool stuff with bleeds now, but in order to be able to do that, you need to play her as like a parry-heavy type of champion, and I think that's one of the biggest issues, at least for me personally, is because they took a vibrant, lively champion where you kind of felt aggressive, felt awesome, using with the huge sword, those awesome animations, and having like an aggressive playstyle, trying to get more and more souls. And they did the stupidest thing ever by kind of turning her into a parry-heavy champion where you play her a lot slower. It feels a lot more tedious, and yes, if you can stun the opponent and if you can land those heavy attacks frequently, you can get somewhat decent damage out of her. But that's about all you get. That level 1 is useless. Healing got nerfed to the ground, level 3 got nerfed to the ground, and some abilities do work better than it did, but this is just a buff that leaves bad taste in everybody's mouth. And as a champion, I kind of actually somewhat want to experiment with her as, a mystic bleed champion. There aren't that many of those. But again, I just feel kind of disgusted a bit looking at using her. I know it's hard to explain. It's one of those champions that felt way better before the buff than now, at least to me. And the whole drama and the whole controversy involved with the champion doesn't help people's current opinion of her. Again, I do think she's better than a lot of people realize she is, but I can't blame anybody for not really wanting to play with Guillotine, because it was a massive letdown as a champion buff. It really was, and we have talked about it for like hours on this channel in between specific videos and buff reviews and streams and stuff like that. So I'm not gonna hang on it too much, but it's bad. No, let's move on to the next one. And this is going to be one of those champions that I don't think is necessarily insanely amazing, but I like, and I find them fun, and I actually ranked it up myself as well, and that is Karnak. Now, Karnak received decent buff. That's all I'm going to say. He is better than he was. Do I think he's crazily amazing champion? No. Do I think he has useful applications? 100%. Super sustainable with Liquid Courage Double Edge masteries. And coincidentally, I think borderline unplayable without them, because his damage really doesn't quite stack up if you're not running Liquid Courage Double Edge. But if you are, he's actually quite fun champion where you can get very good damage output if you are able to consistently knock down the opponent while heavy attack. All in all, he has his resistances, he has his ability to crit through block, you get some extra damage. He can place fragility debuffs on the opponent, which I am 100% convinced is going to be increasingly more popular mechanic, and there will be more nodes themed around it as well in the future. And on top of that, I like the fact that his stuff's passive. His True Strike's passive, his Fury's passive, so you don't need to worry about them, interacting with some nodes and plenty of occasions, so on and so forth. Still has access to Disorient on level 3, but let's face it, nobody's going to use it too much. But all in all, I just look at him as, solid, sustainable skill champion that's quite fun to play, that has passive True Strike and access to passive Furies, and it's not much, but it's an honest day's work, I'd say. So I do quite like Karnak. I don't think, his buff is the craziest or the best, but I do think it is fairly solid. And moving on to spot number 3, we're going to move back to the Cosmic class, and this is another one of those champions that I just found fun, so I ranked him up. After the buff, I sigged up my 5-star, who was rank 3 at the time. I definitely enjoyed using him, and after that, I took him to rank 5. This was one of the very few 5-stars that I ranked up in 2021, and I don't regret it. I still find him interesting. I do think that there are very interesting understated bits of utility within this character, starting with the shock and bleed immunity, and then also immunity to power drain, power steal, power burn, and power lock, and end weight against metal champions. That can definitely come in handy at times. And other than that, I just enjoy his special spamming, his power gains with level 2s, or then, dropping 10 armor breaks and, having fun with the champion. He's fairly decent, fairly good. Unfortunately, he's one of those champions that, in my opinion, has to be awakened, has to be high sig, which is one of the reasons why I ranked him up as a 5-star, because at the time I didn't have a 6-star, and even if I pulled the 6-star, which I eventually did, I know that, you know, I'd still need to awaken the 6-star and sig him up, which I wouldn't as a 6-star. He's not that good. He's not worth 6-star 6 stones. But 5 stars, yeah, why not? And yeah, I like it. It's fun. It's not great. It's not amazing, but definitely has its uses, in my opinion. So let's move on to spot number 22. Spot number 22 is another champion whose value I kind of feel that might increase in near future. Just a hunch, you might say. And that's going to be Ebony Maw. Now, Ebony Maw has the most tragic story in Marvel Construct Champions. Poor guy apparently was absolutely OP, according to Kabam Broccoli. And then, before it got released, he got absolutely butchered into a Squidward, into a meme, into definite noodle. Then he received, I think, 1, 2, and this was 3rd buff. And he's still kind of there. You know, he's still not the easiest champion to play. Especially if you're trying to get the max damage, the max utility out of him. You need to time those level 2s with your falters, and there are still things to be desired within his kit. I'll just leave it at that. There are some cool aspects. I like the fact that he has like the passive degens, and that's not too common. Once you actually gain the 100 charges, his level 1s has like very good nullification abilities. You know, there's power control and heavy attack, and he is better than he was. I just don't think they kind of made him necessarily good enough for him to kind of like shoot on people's radars back up. That being said, there are several reasons why I think his popularity might increase slightly. One of the reasons is the guaranteed critical hits. We're getting more and more champions in the game that have guaranteed critical hits either on their basic or special attacks. And he's like super safe against all of that stuff. And we're getting more nodes for that as well. We have seen those boss nodes appearing semi-frequently in KVQs. We have a boss node like that in 7.3 as well, I believe. And I do generally believe that we're going to see more of nodes similar to that, or abilities that involve guaranteed critical hits. And as soon as that becomes a thing, he's obviously the super mega OP god that can never be touched upon, basically. That's one of the things. Second thing is that he could potentially be also very useful in the solo competitive mode. If it comes in a similar fashion than we saw it in Summoner Showdown. And it's kind of quirky. So I kind of like him. I do like the fact that you can power drain with heavy attacks and stuff like that. So for now, I have taken him to rank 2. And I believe his value is going to rise. But at the moment, he's in spot 22. Let's move on to spot 21. And that is a skill champion, as we can see. And that is OG Black Panther. That is an OG Black Panther. And as an ability kit, he actually got somewhat decent upgrade. The things that didn't really kind of help him is his some of his synergies and some of his damage kind of get taken down. And it's not that he doesn't hit hard. It's just that it doesn't quite seem worth it, considering that you're consistently encouraged to intercept, be super aggressive, with no taunt, with no infuriate mechanic on your base kit, with no safety shields. If he would be much more straightforward to play than he is, I think he would be way more popular. Because right now he has a problem that he has very fast-paced, aggressive playstyle that a lot of people don't like, some people do like, but fact of the matter is, it is quite risky with no fail-safes. All in all, the fact that he can theoretically reduce ability accuracy up to 100% on the opponent, that he can maintain plenty of bleeds and purify debuffs on intercepts and things like that, all of those are good things. I just don't think they kind of mash together well because there is no real safety net, and a majority of the people just kind of don't want to do it. especially considering that there are skilled champions that do every single one of those things with way less downsides. Like if you're looking somebody that will shrug off debuffs, you can simply pick up a Jabari Panther with a cleanse mechanics, or you can use Shang-Chi or Kingpin or Mallman or whoever. If you're looking for a ton of bleeds, you can just pick up Nick Fury. If you're looking for opponent's ability accuracy reduction, just use Falcon, for instance. Every single one of those things somebody might want to use this guy for. There are champions who do the same thing easier, safer, and better, I'd say. And that's kind of the problem with Black Panther. If his playstyle would be more user-friendly without demanding all of those pesky intercepts, especially having all the input and control issues and AI issues that we're having right now, I do think that he would be way more popular. I do think that this champion can perform very well, and if the fight goes your way, he can look very impressive. The problem is that it often doesn't. And for many people, that's reason enough to overlook the champion. So that's where I am sitting with OG Black Panther. In spot number 20, some people will call me a heretic. And hey, I'm going to be the first person to put my hands up. This is arguably the champion I hate the most in the game. What he represents, the way he looks, the way his abilities are, I genuinely dislike everything about this champion, but I am trying to be as objective as I possibly can here as well. And he is not a bad champion anymore. He used to be rubbish. He's quite decent now. And I mean, that should be evident that I still value him higher than I do, let's say, OG Black Panther or Ebony Maw or, you know, Guillotine, Ronin, Yellowjacket. And I just don't value him as highly as some other people do. Part of it might be because I genuinely find him disgusting with his hunchback, his, you know, berserker gorilla looks, and the fact that he is a disgusting piece of shit that should serve as an embarrassment for every single character that is an adaptation from MCU into the MCOC. Because this is not Thor from the beginning of Ragnarok, this is not Thor from the end of Ragnarok, this is Thor from 2 minutes of trailer footage whilst he was fighting Hulk. And his abilities are not those of Thor, in my opinion. His looks are not those of Thor. His weapons and armor are not those of Thor. Nothing is. He's literally some sort of stupid, mindless berserk and gorilla-looking hairy goon from any random strategy game. Whatever. Now that I have put that out loud, so full disclosures there, I hate this champion's guts. Literally would delete it in an instant. I do think that he can do cool things. My problem with Thor Ragnarok is that they did not address the biggest problem with him, and that is that he's absolutely useless for first 40 hits in the fight, or 30 if you have Proximus Energy. For first 40 hits in the fight, he's about as useless as Iron Patriot. I think Iron Patriot is even more useful and superior. Iron Man's more useful for the first 40 hits in the fight because they can gain armor ups and they have probably better damage than this guy does. In order to do anything, you need to hit that power gain, you need to get to the level 3, and then you can start doing damage, and then you do things. And way more often than not, you know, that's just not good enough. That's just not good enough. I'm sure that, yes, once you do hit those power gains, get to the level 3, yes, you can do some cool stuff. Sure. I don't care at that point. I just never want to use this champion. This is a champion design that I kind of never ever want to use unless I absolutely must. Now, you can dismiss this video and my list if you don't like the placement of this champion, but this is where I think he legitimately kind of lies. Can do some cool things, he can like stun lock and, you know, has access to shock. But with all that, still don't think we're going to see too much of this guy. For good reasons. Anyways, that's what I think of Thor Ragnarok. Now you can go and sue me via comment section. Right. Spot number 19. Spot number 19 is actually a champion that I thought that I'm going to be placing a lot higher. Spot number 19 is going to go a champion that I took to rank 3. And it's Crossbones. And I actually really like Crossbones. Also, the initial video seemed, you know, way too kind of crazy with Crossbones. And they're wrong. you shouldn't look at Crossbones as somebody who's going to be doing, 50k guaranteed medium hits, because you get 90 Furies active or something. It's just stupid. It's playstyle very hard to maintain doing that. It's not an enjoyable thing to do, and it's not a realistic thing to do. You're not going to be going for 40 Furies with Crossbones and stuff like that. And I think all the push that this champion received as being able to put up these big numbers kind of did a disservice to the champion and to the community. There are great things about Crossbones that I do like, and I have gotten some use out of them, but mainly it's the fact that he doesn't crit, which is like the best thing. He doesn't crit, and he can reduce opponent's ability accuracy. Obviously, there are other champions that can do it more effectively, but Crossbones does the ability accuracy shtick quite well also. You do want to primarily use him only against hero champions though, which is a downside to the character. All in all, I think he got a solid buff. I wish his MCOC synergy was kind of built in his kit, where he actually gets a reasonable Fury duration. But all things put together, I think he's a solid champion. I think he has a place in the game. I like that he's fairly tanky. I do use him here and there, but I don't think he is remotely as good as he was advertised initially upon his buff. That being said, still super happy with the guy. Do not regret taking him to rank 3. I enjoy using him. Just feels very cool. Right, moving up to spot number 18. Champion that I actually do end up using more, but that ironically is at rank 2 at the moment. And that's Mechakra. I think Mechakra did receive a fairly minimal buff, and he was already quite decent champion. But just to put it simply, they made him better version of himself. If you're taking a look at how big of a benefit and increase he got, he really didn't get all that much. But whatever he did get really just helped him shine better. It's much, 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 much easier to ignite the bat, maintain your combos, and just, start getting to work with the guy. And I genuinely think he's quite good. Also on top of everything else, he has kind of been getting a small resurgence over the last couple of months, because he is a mercenary and he is one of the Deadpool family champions, so he gains that regeneration buff. So he was one of the MVPs for variant 8, which was like awesome to bring in like Domino Trinity. And on top of that, now we have KVQ nodes that has, mercenary tags requested, and he can do those quite well also. And in general, he has always been quite decent champion. That, I do not necessarily use a ton, but I do end up playing with the guy fair enough time. And he's also quite fun. He's definitely an enjoyable champion to use. So I am placing Mechakra in the spot number 18. Spot number 17, and I think at this point we're already kind of getting to the higher quality bits. Not that previous couple of champions were not great, but I think spot number 17 and up are all champions that are very extremely easy to justify and or recommend other people take up, rank up, use them, and find value with them. And starting with that, spot number 17 is a champion that I have yet to rank up. It's War Machine. War Machine's actually, in my opinion, really useful champion now. He is not as quick as kind of like instant as I'd like. When you actually play with War Machine, it does take a while to get his damage and everything else going. That is one of the biggest downsides of the champion. It really is. It can't be not talked about. It can't be escaped. He's fairly slow. He's kind of like Iron Man Infinity War in a sense. There's a ton of utility packed in there, but most of the time, you're just going to be relying on champions that can do the same thing quicker. But War Machine does have the upside, the upside that Iron Man Infinity War doesn't have, and that is his pre-fight abilities. Number one, and second is fairly unique ability as well. So Thanks to his pre-fight abilities, he can strengthen the tech champions quite significantly by granting them basically cleanse charges to get rid of some very pesky debuffs, or just make them Liquid Courage double edge friendly, or increase their debuff duration and base attack and things like that. So he is one of those support champions that's nice to have, and also relatively solid champion. If he didn't have his pre-fight mechanics, I'd definitely rank him lower. But the fact of the matter is that he does, so we need to look at the full picture. The other thing that gives him more value than a lot of people realize, he's like one of the 3 champions in the game that has abilities to remove prowess effects from the opponent. You see, every time with special attack, you have like 5, 6 hits, but you can stack up to 5 suppression debuffs with each level 1. And each time you apply suppression debuff to the opponent, it also removes 1 prowess effect from them. And that is becoming increasingly important thing. If you have taken a look at Alliance War nodes, Path 6 is all about prowess. And at the moment, besides War Machine, there's only like Nimrod and I believe Howard the Duck with Bishop synergy that can remove prowess effects from the opponent. And that alone gives War Machine, you know, a fairly unique ability that is definitely worth knowing about. So that is basically the reason why War Machine is up as high as he is fairly solid champion with pre-fight abilities and this unique point of prowess removal that a lot of people are unaware of, and that definitely is going to become increasingly more and more important. That also makes him a very solid Kitty Pride counter, just FYI. Just so you know, the more you know, right? And after War Machine, the final champion that we're featuring on this list, the champion that digs in spot number 16, is one of the more recent buffs, a champion that I personally definitely enjoy myself. I think eventually he might even jump up higher. It's Joe Fixit. I think Joe Fixit is already a solid buff. He definitely used to be a total meme, and right now, he's good. Like, he's legitimately good. He has access to reliable heal reversal, to a ton of bleed debuffs. He has solid access to increased power gain and, you know, regeneration abilities. On top of that, you can control whether you want your weaknesses, disorients, or petrifies. There's quite a lot of things to like about him. Now, obviously, there is... the good reason he's not anywhere higher is because they kind of ruined him with that diamond deck. You never want to see diamonds roll up. You never want to... The fact that they have taken up a parry, basically, from the champion, it's just disgusting. It genuinely ruins a champion that could have been really great, and it throws him down to decent or good. If only it wasn't for the diamonds, where well-timed blocks give you block penetration, he would be so much better. He's good. He was almost amazing. The thing that ruined him is the fact that you don't ever want to parry with the champion, basically, because then you get diamonds, which, you know, ruins what kind of suits you get, and block penetration in itself is quite useless, and shit, it's a stupid idea. It's kind of ruining a good champion. Could have been way better than he is. He's still quite good. I like him. I enjoy him. But that parry thing just brings him down a bit. All in all, these are the 16 worst buffs. So we started with really bad buffs. We actually ended up with already quite solid buffs. That's quite important to understand. And next video, tomorrow, we're going to be taking a look at 15 best buffs of 2021. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do not want to hold you much longer, but I did want to show you the full list. The full list here. So you can refer to it at the end and reward your patience. But here we are. Tomorrow, we're going to go and check out the best buffs of 2021. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about